The year was 1969. Just a few months earlier, the world had held its breath as Neil Armstrong took his first small step onto the moon. Humanity had done it. We had reached another world. But the adventure was far from over. Now, it was time for Apollo 12. This mission was different. It wasn't just about getting there. It was about proving we could land with pinpoint accuracy. The crew, Pete Conrad, Dick Gordon, and Alan Bean, were three of the best astronauts NASA had. They were a tight-knit team, full of laughter and skill, ready to make their own mark on the lunar surface. Their target was a specific spot in a vast plain called the Ocean of Storms, right next to an old robotic probe named Surveyor 3 that had landed years before. The excitement on November 14, 1969 was electric. The giant Saturn V rocket stood on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, a magnificent metal giant pointing toward the heavens. Inside the tiny capsule at the very top, the three astronauts were strapped into their seats, their hearts pounding with a mixture of anticipation and focus. Down in Mission Control in Houston, Texas, hundreds of engineers and flight controllers stared intently at their consoles. Each screen was a river of numbers, a language only they understood. The final countdown reached 0. We have a liftoff. The ground shook as the 5 massive engines of the Saturn V ignited with a deafening roar, spewing fire and smoke across the launch pad. For the first 30 seconds, everything seemed perfect. The rocket ascended gracefully, piercing through the thick layer of clouds that hung ominously over the launch site. Then, at just 36 seconds into the flight, something went terribly wrong. A brilliant flash of light engulfed the rocket. Inside the command module, the astronauts were momentarily blinded. A loud crackle filled their headsets, and the cabin was suddenly plunged into chaos. Warning lights flared up all over their control panel, a Christmas tree of red and amber alarms. On the ground, confusion reigned. The screens in Mission Control, once filled with clean data, now showed gibberish. Flight Director Jerry Griffin saw the telemetry turn to junk and knew they were seconds away from a mission-ending catastrophe. Just as everyone was trying to process the first disaster, it happened again. At 52 seconds after liftoff, a second bolt of lightning struck the ascending rocket. In the back row of Mission Control sat a young man named John Aaron. He was the flight controller for the Electrical, Environmental, and Communications System, a position known by its acronym ECOM. At just 26 years old, Aaron was one of the youngest people in the room. While others saw a wall of meaningless static on their screens, Aaron saw something familiar. His eyes scanned the strange patterns, ignoring the panic that was beginning to ripple through the room. Aaron had a reputation for being exceptionally prepared. He ran endless simulations, pushing the systems to their breaking points to see how they would fail. He knew every circuit, every switch, and every quirk of the Apollo command module's electrical heart. Months before the Apollo 12 launch, during one of these simulations, he had seen a similar pattern of scrambled data. It was an obscure failure, one that most controllers would never encounter. It happened when there was a complete, but temporary loss of power to a specific piece of hardware called the Signal Conditioning Equipment, or SCE. This device was responsible for converting the raw signals from the spacecraft's sensors into a format that the telemetry system could understand and send back to Earth. The memory of that simulation flashed in Aaron's mind. He realized that if the SCE had lost its power source, it wouldn't know how to function properly, resulting in the garbled data that was now flooding Mission Control. John Aaron's voice was calm and steady as he spoke into the communications loop. The message was relayed instantly to the Capcom, but the command was so unusual, so out of the ordinary, that it was met with a moment of stunned silence. Fortunately, the Capcom, astronaut Gerald Carr, relayed the instruction verbatim to the crew, even if he didn't understand it. Up in the rattling command module, Alan Bean heard the strange command. Bean was just as baffled as everyone on the ground, but in the world of astronauts, you trust Mission Control. It was Alan Bean who remembered its location from his training. His hand shot out to a small, unassuming switch on his panel and flipped it. The effect was instantaneous and, honestly, miraculous. As soon as the switch was flipped to the auxiliary position, the flow of data from the spacecraft cleared up. The garbled mess on the screens transformed back into crisp, clean numbers. They could see everything again. The fuel cells were online and working perfectly. The electrical systems were stable. A wave of relief washed over the control room. With clear telemetry, John Aaron and the other flight controllers could now guide the astronauts through the process of resetting the rest of their systems. They methodically worked through the problems, instructing the crew to restart the fuel cells and realign the guidance platform. One by one, the red warning lights on the control panel blinked out. The crisis was over. With the spacecraft systems restored and the rocket still thundering toward orbit, the mood in mission control shifted from terror to triumphant focus. 3 days later, the crew of Apollo 12 arrived in lunar orbit. Their next challenge was to achieve what no one had done before, a pinpoint landing. Their target was a small crater in the Ocean of Storms, where the unmanned Surveyor 3 probe had touched down 2 years earlier. Commander Pete Conrad, a famously skilled pilot, took manual control of the lunar module, Intrepid. He peered out the small triangular window, searching for the landmarks that would guide him to the landing site. With Alan Bean calling out altitude and velocity, Conrad expertly maneuvered the lander, precisely controlling its descent. He flew over the crater's edge and brought Intrepid to a gentle landing on the dusty lunar surface, just 600 feet from the Surveyor probe. Their success was a monumental achievement. Conrad and Bean spent over 31 hours on the lunar surface, conducting 2 moonwalks. They deployed a sophisticated set of scientific instruments called the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package. In a historic moment, they walked over to the Surveyor 3 probe. They examined the robotic explorer, took photographs, and even snipped off a few pieces to bring back to Earth for analysis. The mission was a resounding success, fulfilling all of its scientific and technical objectives. The crew returned to Earth as heroes, their journey a perfect example of grace under pressure. The story of Apollo 12 is more than a tale of astronauts. It's a reminder that true heroes often work quietly behind the scenes, like John Aaron, the young engineer whose steady focus and readiness saved the mission. Heroism isn't always about being in the spotlight. Sometimes it's about doing your job with excellence, paying attention when others don't, and having the courage to speak up when it matters. Every team has its quiet heroes, the ones who check the details, anticipate problems, and help the group succeed. Their contributions are the foundation of every great achievement. So as you go about your day, remember, you have the power to make a difference, no matter your role. Be ready for your moment. True impact comes from knowing what to do when it matters most.